And joining us now, On Balance host and Chief Washington anchor Leland Vittert. Leland, it's always good to see you. And we are hearing from Prigozhin today in an audio message. Backtracking, he's saying that this was a demonstration, it was a protest, it was not an attempt to overthrow power. What is likely to be true? Or after the fact, is it in the best interest of his own safety to say that he never wanted to overthrow Putin to begin with?
Yes, and that's sort of what makes this so stunning is how little we really know. And I think Kelly was really right to highlight that the administration, at least publicly, is saying they don't know what's going on inside of Russia. And when you consider the Russian military controls the largest nuclear stockpile in the world of nuclear weapons, that is downright terrifying. The idea that there were members of the Russian military appearing to defect, at least that's what we saw in the southern part of Ukraine, as Prigozhin started moving north, is terrifying. You know, the idea that this is over is certainly not certain, and the idea that we could be in a situation over the coming days or weeks where nuclear weapons fall into the wrong hands or it becomes a splintered military inside of Russia still seems to be one that we have to consider.
Leland, are we already seeing evidence that the Kremlin is trying to say that the West was involved with this 36-hour revolt?
They might at some point, and I think that's what you're trying to hear. The U.S. keeps saying, we weren't involved, we weren't involved, we weren't involved. Well, doubt protests too much. And it's curious, right? Because this was the same President Biden who, when he gave his speech in Poland, was so widely praised for saying, for God's sakes, Vladimir Putin has to go. He must go, on and on and on and on. But now at a time when your enemy is appearing to be really weakened, it's the United States backing off and saying we want nothing to do with this, which is very curious in terms of how the administration seems to be playing their cards on this.
Any indication at this point of what the next move will be for Putin and Russia's military?
I think that's the million-dollar question, right? Much more important than sort of the various little chess pieces. You can't forget that Russia has the largest nuclear weapons stockpile in the world, and we don't really know, as far as I've heard from either reporting and or statements from the U.S. administration, that we're certain who's in control of them. And really what the status is of Vladimir Putin and what the status is of the Russian military. So I think that's going to be a wild card going forward. And anytime you have a country which does not sort of view command and control of a civilian rule of the military as we have in the United States and a rule of law, Russia is really run essentially almost like a mafioso with sort of disparate loyalties to Vladimir Putin based on certain relationships and certain favors that he can provide to different people. If all of a sudden those things change quickly, things could look very different in just 24 hours.
What are ordinary Russian citizens saying in all of this? And with that tight rein of information there, do we know if they were even aware of the rebellion as it was happening?
Certainly in the southeastern part of Russia, it appears they were aware because we saw everything happen and them come out and cheer the Wagner troops and on and on. Then again, the one thing to keep in mind, I think this is really important over the next even week or so. There's a saying about Russia, which is nothing's true, but everything's possible. And I don't think we really have an idea of certainty either what did happen, what is happening, or what is going to happen now. And the Russians were the ones who invented the idea of hybrid warfare, of using information or disinformation to shape the narrative. This is how Vladimir Putin does business. So you really don't know what's true and what's not.
Give us an idea. What is your team working on for the show tonight?
John Bolton on all of these issues, and really the issue of what should be the United States response to this. Over the weekend, we saw, obviously, the Secretary of State go on the Sunday shows and sort of talk about it. But are we missing an opportunity? And has Joe Biden changed his view of Vladimir Putin? Are we either missing an opportunity to push out Vladimir Putin, or are we not doing enough to make sure the United States is ready to respond if something happens with the Russian military and their nuclear weapons?
Okay, appreciate the sneak peek and your time as always, Leland Vittert. Thank you. We'll see you later.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.